bracha. I just for a moment before we begin learning inside, give you a recap of the history of the Maimer, just to put in perspective. I don't know if I told you this since we began learning these Maimarim. 1934 in Latvia, in Riga, Latvia. Riga, Latvia was the culture, the Jewish culture was pretty much Rabbi Shamshon Raphael Hirsch's ideology. Torah and Derech Eretz, that was the culture. Here comes a Hasidic Rebbe, I don't know if the only one, but definitely the most famous one, if there were others there, and it could be there weren't any other Hasidic Rebbes there. And he lands there, and it's very out of style, and it's different. He has a small group of Hasidim, namely Rabbi Hodakov, the Rebbe's longtime closest secretary, was the education minister for the Jewish school, for the government, for the Jewish schools. So he had a very prominent role. And Rabbi Hodakov was a real master educator. There's a book that Chabad published, not written by him, but based on many of his ideologies, and it's fascinating, And the few times I heard him talk in 770, he was a real yeke. It's hard to believe. And he was born in Russia, in Beshenkovitz, but he was, I think, raised in that culture, and he was born into, I think, to a Lubavitcher family, but, not passionate Farbrengen Lubavitcher Hasidim, I assume. Anyway, somehow he met the Rebbe, Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe met him because he came to Lat, and Frierdiker Rebbe saw in him a future because he was such an excellent educator. So how do you mix? But yet he's an educator for the Torah and Derech Eretz system of teaching and learning, which is very different than a Hasidic teaching and learning system. So the Frierdiker Rebbe gave autonomy. Not that, what do you mean he gave him autonomy? It's not his department, but meaning to say, he brought him into Lubavitch, into his work. He cherished and valued everything he did, and he lauded him, and he basically said that he has the right model, and he also educated him through his talks and Hasidus, and probably private talks, to add the Chabad ethos and mindset to the Yekish, to the Yeke mentality. And that's a very interesting combination. And really, a very healthy combination. But that we'll have to leave for another time, why I say that. When you take a Yeke and you bring Hasidus into a Yeke, in a way you get the best of both worlds. Because the Yeke is proper, clean, organized, on time, all of that. And at the very same time, with a Hasidic warmth as a way to express your organized style. I can elaborate on that, but I don't want to right now because it just takes away more time. So that was Rabbi Hodakov. Then there was another individual, Rabbi Mordechai Dubin. Rabbi Mordechai Dubin was a Lubavitcher with a full beard and a long frock, but he dressed like he was a parliament minister. So he dressed regally. If you take a look at his picture, you can find it, I think, online. You see, he was so royal. And he had a tremendous koyach in the government, representing Jewish causes. And he was like tight, very tight with the Frierdiker Rebbe. So the Frierdiker Rebbe was able to work with him in teaching and disseminating Torah, more than Torah and Derech Eretz, Torah and Hasidus. So again, not to exclude the Torah and Derech Eretz, because otherwise it's not the style. See, it's a mistake that some people make, And if anyone does this, they're wrong. Just for the record, you should know that the Frierdiker Rebbe and our Rebbe were very careful not to disrupt and not to antagonize other frum institutions in the cities that they came to. Okay? Were there disagreements at times? Yes, there were. But that was, like the psak in halacha is that when it comes to Talmud Torah and when it comes to learning and davening, there's no what's it called? Like you're not allowed to make one store next to another store, right? That's the halacha. But that doesn't apply to learning and davening. That's a halacha. So a certain rabbi, I interviewed him once, he told me at a taina, why did the Rebbe send a shliach to Springfield, Massachusetts, when there was already an existing Orthodox school and all that? And the Rebbe said to him, we weren't taking away your kids. We Merkers felt there's a need there for non-religious kids from non-Orthodox homes that were going to public schools, and we cater to them. You know that Lubavitch caters to them through the release time. And he told me, well, he was not happy. He walked out not happy. But that's, it's a legitimate disagreement. On the other hand, in Mexico, for example, for years there was no Lubavitch Shliach, for years. And the Rebbe wrote and said, why? He said, because there is an existing community and you have to go through them. In Colombia, South America, till today, the Shliach, who was tight with the Roars, with Sammy Roar and George Roar and family, and believe me, they funded him. He could have done anything and everything, trust me, because he had all the money that he needed. He still davens at the Orthodox shul. He did not open his own shul. Derech Eretz. We're not here. So, yes, sometimes you guys probably have heard this and that and all that. You have to really know the facts from the inside, not just from what people say, because most of it's not true. And then understand that the Rebbe and the previous Rebbe were very careful. So why do I say this? Here, the Frierdiker Rebbe comes to Riga. Riga has an established school, but it's an established community, but it's Yekish and Torah and Derech Eretz. The Rebbe comes and he's offering Torah and Chassidus, something different. And because of Rabbi Hodakov and Rabbi Dubin, it was synthesized and it worked out very well. So that's why I say, in a way, they had the best of both worlds. What is he speaking about in these Maimurim that we're learning? About Ilu v'Olol and Yesh Mi'ayin and philosophers. Because the culture in Riga was a very philosophical culture. And a very, scholarship and ideology was very much part of the Jewish mindset. So the Rebbe tackles these ideas in the discourses that he said in 1934, dealing with this topic. I mean, this is my own putting together what I see. Take it or leave it, because it's not written anywhere. I don't think it is. So I think that this is a background. When we learn these Maimurim, you have to put yourself into Riga, 1934, and based on everything I said, you'll understand why he said these Maimurim. I just want to point out that when this is a hypothesis. And, if you'll say this to a strong Kfar Chabad chassid, he'll punch you in the face. And he'll say, you don't know what you're talking about, and how do you know? And you chutzpah, the Rebbe says, Chassidus, it's God's words, and zehu. Well, what are you hacking a chaynik? So I'm saying clearly from the outset, it's just an idea, and, and that's it. Just an idea based on the historical context of the time. So I just wanted, for the record, to make myself clear, since it is on Facebook and later on YouTube for eternity, that I'm not a Yedei of Machshavos. I don't know the thoughts of the Rebbe back in 1934, nor do I want to know. I'm not in that league, and but see this, yeah.
Rebbe, why did the Frierdiker Rebbe chose a Litvish, Litvia, Latvia, the same area, Yekish, whatever, a non-Hasidic place?
Well,
there was plenty of Hasidic places to go to.
Wait, no. I'm sorry. You're not. Your history doesn't seem to be on par right here. No, there was only one Hasidic place. It was called Poland. That's it. So it's only Poland. The Rebbe was in Russia. The KGB were after him. They wanted to kill him. Travel was very difficult. And he wanted to stay in Russia. Basically, they said, you go out or we kill you. So they let him out. So he's basically kicked out. He can't go back. His father country, 112 years. Lubavitch was 102 years in Lubavitch. From the Mittler Rebbe, from 1812 or so, whatever, till 1916, or 1814, whatever, 102 years, the previous Rebbe says, we were in Lubavitch. So Lubavitch is Russia. Our base, until America, was Russia. And that's why the Frierdiker Rebbe said, one of the reasons I came to Eretz Yisrael to go to the B'kaimas HaKadoshim, to the holy places, the holy sites, to Dubin, is because I can't go to my ancestors in Russia. He couldn't go to the Tzemach Tzedek and the Marash who are buried in Lubavitch. He couldn't go to his own father in Rostov. So he says, let me go to Eretz Yisrael. And again, let's not get into the politics that's holier than this. I'm not going that direction. Of course, Eretz Yisrael is Eretz Yisrael. But the Rebbe gave an explanation, one of the reasons. So he's out of Russia. The reason he went to Riga, Latvia initially in 28 was because he had this Dubin, I think, who found him a haven. Okay? For some reason, I don't know, but it was difficult to get to Varsha. Actually, if my memory serves me well, I think he wanted to go to Varsha, but he couldn't. I think in 31, he wanted to go to Varsha, but it didn't work out. This is recorded in our history called Toldos Chabad, and the details there. So then he goes back to Leningrad. Why? Because that's his place. He was able to go back to Leningrad. No, I'm sorry. No, that was in 1924. I got mixed up. He never went back to Leningrad. Leningrad, he was St. Petersburg. He was in 24 and 25. That's when my wife's grandfather met the Rebbe at the Purim Farbrengen in 1925 in St. Petersburg. And he met the Rebbe's brother, whose Yartzeit is today. Rabbi Yisrael Arye Leib was buried in Tzfas. Yud Gimel Ear, today is his Yartzeit. So my wife Zayda, Reb Zalman Serebransky, met him in 1925 at the Purim Farbrengen by the Frierdiker Rebbe in there. Anyway, so Yoni, he wanted to go, but he couldn't go, and he had here people in Riga, Latvia, who were supportive of his work. Then in 1933, or 34, I forget when, he moves over to Poland, and the Rebbe said years later that it was uncomfortable for him. The Rebbe said, he quoted the pasuk by Yosef, "Vayekanu Bayechov." His brothers were jealous of him. He meant the other Hasidic communities. Why? When the Frierdiker Rebbe said Amayim Chasidus, and we're learning his Maimorim, and in Poland we see that he said many more, it seems like Avodah Maimorim, more heartfelt that we've learned over the years. It spoke a lot to the Polish Hasidim. And he had many Gera Hasidim, Alexander Hasidim flocking to him. Well, the leadership wasn't so happy. And it was a time of fallout. The youth was all over the place. And here, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was this, newcomer, and he's a Russian, yes, he puts on a spodek to conform with the community, but nevertheless, he's a Russian. And we're Polacks, okay? At the end of the day, you have to remember that these things make a difference when you get down to it, You don't know, you Polak or you Russian, okay? So, and he's powerful, and his speech and his mannerism and his royalty. Some of the Polish Rebbes they were more, how should I say this, more earthy. I'll give you an example. There was a Rebbe, the Borisov Rebbe. There was a Hasidus in Poland called Borisov. This Borisov Rebbe came to see the previous Rebbe in Otwotsk, somewhere yes.
The Bala Sulam was from Borisov, right? Same lineage?
Yeah, I think so. So in 1930s, 35, 36, 37, he comes to see the Rebbe. You know how the Rebbes would come to each other, to greet each other, to give shalom. During Chalamoyed, it's something that's still done, right? The Lubavitcher Rebbe comes in, and our Rebbe came along to accompany his father-in-law. Anyway, they're sitting at a table. So the Borisov Rebbe says to his gabbai, bring kibud, bring some kibud. So he goes out to his backyard. He had an apple tree in the backyard, and he picks some apples. He puts the apples in his kapota sleeve. Don't ask, I guess he took a lot of apples. He comes in, and it's a long table. He's standing on the other end of the table where the Rebbe and the Borisov Rebbe are sitting, and he rolls the sleeve out, and the apples go rolling down the table to the Rebbe and the Borisov Rebbe, and you put the apples. The Borisov Rebbe cuts a piece of apple, puts it in front of the Rebbe, and he says, please, make a bracha. The Frierdiker Rebbe came up with a big chiddush. He said that when we say that Achnasis Archen Gedela Kabbalah Shechina from the Chumash, greater is receiving the Shechina than greater is Kabbalah's Archen, Achnasis Archen than Kabbalah's Pnei Shechina from Avram Avinu. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said, I came here to talk Torah, to be Makabel the Shechina. I didn't come here for Achnasis Archim. And that's the way he got out of eating the apples. Why? Because he was repulsed by the apple. Picking apples with dirty hands, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying they were dirty, no. But the cleanliness, I'm showing you, the cleanliness of the Frierdiker Rebbe, it was a different royalty. The Russian, Lubavitch royalty isn't a different level. It's a different type. That's what I mean by culture, But in Poland, the whole idea of shirayim, and you see by, even today, stick your hand in, it's eat together, now I hope and pray after everything's back to normal that some of this will stop. Because it's really, terrible, sticking by a kiddush, sticking the thing into the herring, and the guy puts in the fork, and, and everyone's eating from each other, and it's really, disgusting and dangerous. But in Poland, this was the culture. It's the culture. You want to say something, Hillel?
Yeah, I wonder if you can expand on this. I saw something this week that suggested that it would be kind of a machlokus among the postgame, whether to embrace or adopt the custom of shaking hands. And I didn't know the halachic background of it. Are you familiar with this at all?
With what? With what?
The custom of shaking hands, men shaking hands, like that.
Look, in 1976, a group of invalid Israeli soldiers, because they were survived the Yom Kippur War, and some were in wheelchairs. They came to tour New York, and the leader said he thought it would be a nice thing to tour also, come to the Rebbe. This is online. I've told you about this, and it's worth watching. And the Rebbe said he said, I'm going to come down, I want to give each of you Shalom Aleichem. And the Rebbe gave each of them Shalom Aleichem. Now you would think the Rebbe did it a nice gesture, the right gesture, but this was very unusual. The Rebbe spoke hundreds of times to men and even women and saying he's not going down, shaking people's hands or just saying. Then at the Farbrengen, I think on Shabbos, the Rebbe explained that according to the Kabbalah, the word Yad is 14, like the 14 books of the Rambam. And when two Yidden give a hand to each other, they form a name of Hashem that's Yud Lamed Yud, if I remember correctly. And and it was like, you have to read the Sichot. It's fascinating. The Rebbe took a handshake, and he shows us from the Arizal that it's much more than a handshake. You form a name of Hashem through a handshake. So that's what I know. What you're referring to, I don't know, but I'll ask we have a group of us, my Chaverim, I'll ask so you're saying there's a discussion of the poskim, whether you should or you shouldn't give a handshake?
I'd like to know the background of it, what the issues were, and because it's quite possible that there will be strong social sanctions to do away with the custom of shaking hands. In general, I think maybe in perpetuity after this.
It's not hygienic, anyways. It's not hygienic in many cases.
Well,
I'm sorry, Rabbi, I have to go.
Anyway,
I have to go. I wish everyone a good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Yeah. So Hillel, I'll ask, and if I have something to relay, I'll let you guys know.
Well, I don't know if this is the same mahalech as the story you told, but one time there's a beautiful Rebbe called the Strebkover Rebbe.
Yeah.
Sacher Dov Halberstam, I think is his name, and he lives in not Geula, Kiryat Moshe.
Okay.
I think. Anyway, so one time I was visiting Baltimore, and I was with my son and his best friend, whose name was Daniel Yaakov. So when the Rebbe gave each of them Shalom Aleichem, when he comes to Daniel Yaakov, he says, Daniel was like hesitant to shake his hand. He says, Atayad, Daniel Yaakov, Rashi Tevas Yad, Veni Yad. Biyad, Anachnu Yedid.
Anachnu what?
Yedid.
Oh, Yedid. That's very nice. Yad and Yad is Yedid.
Yeah.
So anyway, why did we speak about? Because of the cleanliness, and I just brought the story again to not to belittle any Hasidus, but there's a different culture. Yeah, we have to train ourselves to look at these things to understand behavior. This is a fundamental part of my writing that I try to teach people that look at the cultural and historical realities of the time to understand more of what was going on. And that's not a replacement for the Kedusha and the holiness. Of course not. Nevertheless, the Frierdiker Rebbe, for example, he writes to his wife from Eretz Yisrael. He says, thousands of people came out to hear the mimer, and I said it on the roof of the building so people can hear me better and see me better, or the porch, whatever. You said a mimer Chassidus. It's godliness. Why are you telling your wife that you were impressed with the amount of people? But he wrote it. I didn't write it. He wrote it. And he's the same tzaddik that you're learning his mimer. Obviously, this is important for us to know. This wasn't his ego. He said Chassidus because Hashem wanted him to deliver this piece of godly information through the mimer at this time. Nevertheless, it happened at a certain time. And it happened at a certain porch, by the way, which is when you walk into the Armenian Quarter, up on the left, that's the porch. I've actually saw the porch, or he stayed at 5 Ben Yehuda. Number 5 Ben Yehuda was the Admursky hotel, and that's where the previous Rebbe stayed. So when I met Eisenbach, the Eisenbach in the what's it called section of Nachlaot, the Batei Ran section, and I developed a beautiful relationship with him. He told me stories, and one of the stories he told me is in 1929, my father on Tisha B'Av tells me, "Come, we have to go to help this Rebbe make a minyan, the Frierdiker Lubavitcher Rebbe." Because the secretary came running and saying the Rebbe has no minyan, and outside on Ben Yehuda, you think they were only the only party today. Even then, the Rebbe writes he was crying because he looked outside and he saw boys and girls eating and drinking, and it's Tisha B'Av. You got to see what he writes about it. It's like your heart will fall out, you know. So his secretary runs to Batei Ran, which is like 5-7 minutes away by foot. He asks for a minyan. Could you help? This Eisenbach's father, Chaim Hirsch, already was turned on to Chabad Chassidus through Rebbe David Tzvichein, a big Lubavitcher Chassid from the Rashab, and he had a derech eretz. So when he comes into the shul, he says to his son, "Let's go." He puts on his julka, the outer brown coat that the Yerushalmi wear on top of their regular frock. Excuse me. And he takes his 9-10-year-old boy with him. And he told me this. And 1929, he remembered exactly. And he said, you have to understand, to leave Batei Ran was like the splitting of the Red Sea. The Kedusha and Tahara and the crying for the Churban Beis HaMikdash in Batei Ran, that Tisha B'Av, was real. And he leaves. And Mincha time. Mincha is when we say B'nai Yerushalayim, where we say the special tefillah once a year. And he leaves it and he goes to help the Rebbe. So the Rebbe was a person, the previous Rebbe, who... so what I'm saying is that the Frierdiker Rebbe wasn't, some charlatan who needs people to listen to him, and he writes a letter. You're talking about a tzaddik, you're talking about Kedusha, but nevertheless, the circumstances of where he was and when he was and everything else puts things into perspective. What is the time now? Because we've been going on.
It's about time.
Rabbi, I want to tell you something interesting. It's Min Hashamayim because 25 years ago, when I first met my wife's grandfather, who you know very well. So I met him 25 years ago, when we were engaged, and he told us a story. He told us a story about what happened in Canada. He came to Canada from Russia, and he said that in Russia, until you mentioned the story with the Rebbe and the apples, I didn't understand the concept of Chabad royalty. Meaning, I didn't, today you see Chabad, it's not royalty, it's not royalty. But he was trying to explain what you were saying. They came with their servants. He said they brought their servants. He was cousin with the Frierdiker Rebbe, and they brought to Canada their Japanese servants. In Russia, they had Japanese servants. And brought them over to Canada. They would, be their help and hired hands and everything. And basically, he told us, he says that his mother, she lived in the house, but he was raised by this Japanese, cleaning lady, helper. And I didn't understand the story. It's like why? Like, here's a Hasidic family, and there's a Japanese women. It was what you said. It was like mom and we were like royalty, and they had this huge palace. They moved into a place in Canada. I forgot it's called, like Manitoba. Manitoba. They built a huge house there, and there was no people around. And he told us these crazy stories. But now I'm starting to understand the stories, from your stories.
By the way, I want to correct myself. The Rebbe had lived in Riga from 1928 8 or so till 33, but he was very familiar with the culture. When he said this mimer, he already was living in Warsaw, but he came back to Riga to say the Hasidus. So I was wrong. I realized he wasn't living at the time there. He had left there in 33 and he moved to Warsaw, but he came back. And everything else I said is correct because he was very familiar with the culture because he lived there from 28 till 33. Everyone, listen, we had a Farbrengen, so we didn't learn inside, but we had a Geschmack of Farbrengen. It's always good to have a Geschmack of Farbrengen. So I think everyone appreciated it. And if not, I apologize because we were supposed to learn from the text, but we'll learn Mitzvah Shem Sunday. Have a great Shabbos, only good health, stay safe, and we'll see each other soon. Bye-bye.
Okay.